Welcome to our online workshop. Today we'll be discussing how to manage the remote teaching workload. My name is Amanda Smothers and I'm the Teaching and Learning Coordinator. I work in the Faculty Development and Instructional Design Center. I earned my PhD in English from NIU in 2016, and I've been teaching college English for over 12 years. Early on, I taught face-to-face only, but I've been teaching a combination of face-to-face, hybrid, and online courses for about 5 years. And like all of you, I had to move one of my face-to-face courses to remote delivery in the past couple of weeks. So I feel your pain. Today we'll discuss a few aspects of the remote teaching workload. There are standards for quality online instruction, which you can see on this slide, but we won't really discuss those today because you didn't have the opportunity to plan for your online course. So instead we'll be focusing on how to handle the unexpected workload for your remote course delivery. However, if you do plan to teach online in the interim session, summer, or in the future, we do encourage you to look into our training for quality online course design so you can plan for your course to meet quality online course design standards. In this workshop, we'll be sharing practical strategies for how to keep up with your remote delivery of courses. I'll also be sharing tips for how to save time in your course delivery and on how to increase your efficiency. We'll discuss being flexible with course design, scaling back your course requirements and expectations, dealing with less than ideal remote work conditions, managing the unexpected workload that has come along with remote teaching, and grading more efficiently to save yourself some time. So we all had a plan when we designed our courses before the semester began. We planned for face-to-face delivery, and the elements of our course design were tailored to that mode of delivery. Now we have to adjust to remote delivery of our face-to-face courses, and we haven't had the luxury of time to plan our courses ahead of time before they began and knowing the mode of delivery. Because of the sudden shift of how we need to deliver our courses, we need to acknowledge that we don't have the flexibility to plan ahead. Since we've been tasked with rethinking how we design our courses this semester, we have to adjust to this lack of flexibility by being more flexible. These are not the ideal teaching or learning circumstances, and we cannot simply replicate our face-to-face courses in a remote format without trade-offs, adjustments, difficulties. While we want to address our course objectives, it may be necessary to adjust our expectations for assessments we had planned for face-to-face courses, or rethink how we should assess students remotely. We may make plans for the rest of the semester, but we need to be able to pivot. Recognize that it may be necessary to implement alternative pedagogies because our original plans and even our altered plans may not work out in a virtual learning environment. That leads into our next topic, perhaps more of a subtopic, which is managing expectations. We are in uncharted territory. We are delivering our courses in a new format, working from home, dealing with the distraction of kids, pets, and significant others, figuring out how to balance work and life while rarely leaving home, handling the social, emotional, and mental toll of social distancing and stay-at-home orders, and our students are tackling some or all of the same issues as well. So it's okay to scale back and to be flexible. It's okay to change plans and make things easier on ourselves and our students. This isn't business as usual. This is a global emergency. We don't have to do things the way that we would do them in ideal circumstances. Yes, we want our students to achieve our course outcomes, but we also want them to stay engaged in our courses and not disappear because they're overwhelmed, to complete and succeed in our courses and not fail because they couldn't handle the original plan along with all of the other challenges thrown in their paths. We also want to take care of our own mental and emotional well-being. We don't want remote course delivery to work as well as our face-to-face courses worked because it can't. The circumstances don't lend themselves to quality online teaching and learning. We need to survive by facing the reality of our current situation and adjusting our expectations accordingly. Whether that means assigning less homework or switching from the homework you had planned to online discussion boards, switching from timed exams to project-based learning, an essay assignment, or open book exams, moving from synchronous sessions to asynchronous learning because while our students were planning to take our course during a specific time, they may be in a different time zone or country now, have to share technology with younger siblings who are required to complete synchronous virtual learning at the same time, have to watch their siblings while their parents work, don't have the bandwidth or data available to participate in synchronous sessions, or any of myriad other challenges they may be facing. and any other number of adjustments that we may need to make to get through the next weeks. The semester will not be everything we wanted it to be, and that's okay under the circumstances. Something you'll want to do if you haven't already that will help manage your workload is to set clear expectations for communication with your students. You cannot be on call 24/7. That's unsustainable. Part of adjusting to remote teaching is setting boundaries, establishing working hours, and sticking to them. Tell students that you want them to succeed, but you cannot be available at all hours to answer their emails. Come up with a reasonable amount of time, such as 24 hours, to receive a response from you, or set office hours during which you'll respond to emails and messages. You could also create a Q&A forum that all students can see. Then you could answer questions in this forum so all students can see the answer, and so hopefully you won't get duplicate questions in your email. In my online courses, I also provide a small amount of extra credit for students who answer the question correctly before I get to it. This incentivizes students to check the Q&A board and to look for the answer to their peer's question, which also helps me manage my workload by having extra sets of eyes to help with these general inquiries. You should also provide students with information about a time frame in which they can expect responses from you in the Q&A forum. This can be the same policy that you have for emails, or it could be different. Perhaps you want to respond to these questions more quickly to incentivize students to use the forum instead of emailing. Establishing clear expectations for communication will hopefully help students manage their expectations and not give you follow-up emails when you don't answer immediately after they email you, for example, at midnight. So whatever your policy is for handling student emails and forum questions, be clear about when you'll get back to them and then stick to that. And that gives students a frame of reference for when they can expect a response from you so that maybe they're not as anxious about not hearing from you immediately. You may also want to outline for students how they should be emailing you. So in other words, if you have any netiquette rules, do you want them to include certain information in the subject line? Should they format the greeting a certain way, or how should they address you? What are your expectations for content? How should they sign their email? Having guidelines for this type of information will help you quickly identify who the student is who's emailing, which class section they're in, what the answer to their question is, so you don't have to search around trying to figure out who the student is or what class they're in, particularly if you teach a large number of students or if you have, a large class with 100 students. So here are just some examples of statements that you could use to establish communication guidelines. And of course, you know your students and you know yourself. So these are not examples that you have to use, but figure out what would work best for you with your communication expectations. You could tell students to post questions in the Q&A discussion forum if they're not private, and respond to classmates' questions if they know the answer. You could explain that you'll respond to all emails and Q&A forum queries within 24 hours. You could say that you'll read and respond to an email once in the morning and once in the afternoon. Give them maybe some specific times. Let students know that if they don't hear from you right away, to please be patient. You could have students include the course number in the subject line of their email, open with a greeting. You might want them to write in full sentences, be specific about what they need so that you can give them the help that they need as quickly as possible, and also to sign the email with their full name so that you know who is emailing you. Whatever your expectations are, make them communicate them to students in multiple ways, such as emailing them through a course announcement, in the content area of your Blackboard course, even in a revised syllabus addendum for remote learning. In the original course view, you can subscribe to a discussion forum, which means that you'll get notifications when someone posts to the forum or responds to a classmate's post. This will help you keep track of whether, how often, and when students are participating in the Q&A discussion forum so that you can get into the forum to either answer questions or provide extra credit to students who answer each other's questions. So that's a good way to get those notifications quickly. There may be some of you who use Ultra Course View, so I do want to address that as well. There's a difference between Ultra Base Navigation, which we all use. That's what you see when you first log into Blackboard, and Ultra Course View, which is the design of an individual course. That's what you see when you click on the course that you're teaching in Blackboard. For Ultra Course View, unfortunately, there's no option to subscribe to a discussion forum at this time. You can set up notifications, however, in the activity stream, and this works for Ultra and Original View courses, so that you can get an alert when there's activity in all discussion forums. You can't pick individual forums for which to get notifications, but it's good to know when your students are participating in all of your discussion forums, just in general too, so that you know when to go in there and check. And you can receive notifications either via email or push notifications. Another way to save time in addressing student questions is to provide students with specific instructions for what you want them to do. This could be expectations for assignments, such as these instructions for discussions that I've got here, this example, or it could be instructions for how to use specific tools, such as the Office 365 class notebook, Blackboard Collaborate, or online discussion boards. Providing specific instructions helps to reduce student questions and reduce the need for your intervention. You can also save yourself time by finding ready-made instructions so that you don't have to come up with these on your own, particularly for course tools or technology. Blackboard has video instructions and tutorials that you could use for that. We have some on our website as well on faculty development. We also have a license at NIU for LinkedIn Learning, and you can find instructions and tutorials that you can post in your online class there to save yourself even more time while designing your course. So a big challenge that we may be facing is dealing with less than ideal work conditions. These conditions may include bandwidth issues, data issues, caring for kids, facilitating your own kids' learning at home, caring for the elderly, ill, or disabled family members, pets interjecting themselves into our workspace and becoming the star of our team's meetings, and all of that housework that's right in front of our faces as we're trying to work. It takes time to adjust to all of the distractions if we ever really adjust to them. Maybe you expected to work during what were your normal work hours, but you find it difficult to do so because of those new work conditions. Perhaps you have to adjust your schedule to complete your work after your kids go to bed, or negotiate with your partner to stagger work hours to minimize distractions. Maybe you need to hang a sign on your office door that tells your kids when you're in a synchronous session or Teams meeting so they know not to disturb you, depending on the age of your kids. Whatever ways you can come up with to make your remote work learning conditions work for you and to lessen whatever negative impact they have on your teaching, try to implement them. And that'll depend on your individual circumstances and your individual work conditions as you're working from home. On the other hand, going back to my previous point about managing expectations and being flexible, you may also just need to scale back and do what you can with what you have. Everyone moving face-to-face courses to remote delivery has had an unexpected workload thrust upon them. We did all the work of planning our classes way back in December and January, and now we have to redesign our courses for remote delivery and learn a ton of new tools and programs to help facilitate our students' learning, and that's a lot of extra work. So next, I'm going to share with you a few strategies for managing this new and increased workload. The first tip that I will share is to use existing learning resources. For instance, NIU has come a long way with increasing and improving access to affordable course materials for students. Our Textbook Affordability Task Force has created a resource for NIU faculty that illustrates the impact of expensive textbooks on students, and this resource includes ways to discover high quality, low cost, or free alternatives to textbooks or supplements to textbooks. Some of the open educational resources, or OERs as they're called, linked on the library website include Merlot, Open Textbook Library, and OER Commons, but there are several other linked options as well. If you are providing students with resources or need supplemental resources to help facilitate student learning remotely, consider finding materials through open educational resources that won't cost your students anything and that can be shared and utilized electronically. You could also use resources that offer ready-made lessons you could incorporate into your course on Blackboard. For example, TED-Ed has a plethora of searchable lessons educators have created that correspond with a video from TED-Ed's vast library. You can use the lessons as is, or you can edit them to suit your needs. You could also create your own lessons through TED-Ed and link to the lesson on Blackboard, and TED-Ed is free to use. You could also search for educational videos on any course topic through the good old standby YouTube. Pay attention to who has posted the video and make sure to watch the entire video and listen to the entire video before sharing it with your students to avoid any inappropriate, inaccurate, or irrelevant content. You can use short videos to spark conversation in online discussion boards, or have students reflect on or respond to the ideas presented in the video, or to connect what they've learned to concepts presented in the clip. There are many more sites that may help you share content with students in a remote format while easing your workload. For example, Better Explained has math lessons that begin with the bigger picture and then use text and video to explain the specifics. Ultimately, it may be worth investigating whether there are existing resources that will help you lessen your workload while still helping you facilitate effective learning experiences for your students. As you explore learning resources you may want to incorporate into your courses, determine where you want to compile these resources to keep them organized for yourself or for your students. To keep it simple, you could create a Word document or a OneNote document with a list of hyperlinks to save and share with students, or you could use an external site like Diigo or Evernote. You could also create a class notebook in your NIU Office 365 account, which you can then share with students. And an Office 365 class notebook is also a great way to involve students by having them share links or resources within the notebook that they find helpful or useful. You can create a collaboration space where you and students can add and edit content, and all students can view all of the content in the space. You could also create a content library in which you as the teacher can add resources that the students can view, but they cannot edit or add to them. And then finally, another option is you can create student notebooks, which are private spaces for each student to add content that no other student can view. But you can also add content to a student's notebook. So for example, if you think an individual student could benefit from an additional resource, you could add it to her student notebook and nobody else would be able to see that content. So here's just a glimpse of what it looks like to set up your class notebook in O365. Notice that you can add another teacher in the notebook. At this time, you can only add one teacher, one additional teacher. So if you have a TA, they could be added in the teacher role and they could have access to the collaborative and private notebooks as well. Also, you can add all of your students to the notebook and design private spaces for them to share their work with you privately. You can also manage your workload by creating a template of sorts for your classes that you can use to make sure you remain consistent in how you set up each week and unit of the course. This example template, note yours doesn't have to be this detailed or include this many categories, but this outlines the sections of the course in a particular order, and then you would fill it in with details for each unit or week as you're delivering your remote course. You do not have to show this template to students, but it's a great idea to create a consistent template for yourself to make sure you include everything you want to for each learning unit. And it's also helpful for students to have a consistent format so that they know what to expect and how to navigate your remote course on Blackboard. So for example, my online course, I just have each module has its own folder, and then within that, I've got 3 folders, one for lessons, one for discussions, and one for assignments. And it's in a consistent order for each module, so students know where to find everything every time they go into my course modules. So regarding Ultra View courses, since there can be only 2 levels of folders in an Ultra View course, you would want to create a learning module first to kind of get around that a little bit. And then you'd create 2 levels within that learning module, a folder and then a folder contents. So links, documents, assessments, etc. So this is just a screenshot of how one learning module might be set up in the course. Notice that I've created this learning module above the welcome section so that students don't have to scroll down to find the most current content. It's right at the top and convenient for them to access, so you won't get emails or calls, hopefully, asking you where to find this week's lessons and assignments. That is, unless you forgot to make that content available. So for my online courses, for example, I have, every time I add a new module or a new folder, I add it and move it to the top so that students can find it very easily. A big consideration for managing your time is setting a time limit and schedule for grading papers and assessments. If you find yourself spending too much time grading papers, you may want to set a certain amount of time to spend on each paper, whether it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes or somewhere in between before you move on to the next. Having that time limit in mind and even using a countdown timer, which I've done when grading a big stack of essays to keep myself on track, helps you stay on track and focus on giving students the most essential feedback and not getting bogged down with minute details that might not be the most important thing to comment on. A great way to manage your grading is to plan out your routine and make it consistent so that your workload is predictable and you can stick to a schedule. For instance, I might schedule my weekly announcement to go out every Monday at a certain time, and you can schedule that ahead of time, or you can log in to post manually each week. Then I might schedule every Tuesday and Wednesday as grading days for the previous week's assignments so I can make sure I keep up with my grading and get students' feedback before they have to submit the next week's work, which will then help them adjust for my expectations. And then when I'm finished grading, I would plan to send an announcement letting students know that grading's completed and telling them how to view their feedback before they submit their current week's work. And then finally, I might post a reminder about due dates on Thursday to allow students to know that their assignments are coming up that have due dates. So just communicating with students and establishing that routine will really help them stay on track, and it'll also give you some guidelines for how to stay on track with your work. Once you have a routine established, you can work to keep that routine up over the subsequent weeks of your course. You might need to adjust or tweak the schedule if you have a big project due or an exam, but having that routine established for yourself will help you manage your grading schedule, and that'll help your grading sessions be more efficient and consistent. So if you take a look at your schedule and you're overwhelmed by all of the tasks and assignments and quizzes and tests you're assigning and aren't sure how you're going to keep up with your grading, that might be a sign that you just need to manage your expectations and make some adjustments to your plans. Chances are that if you're overwhelmed looking at the schedule, your students will be even more overwhelmed. Another tip that I can offer is to send assignment reminders to help students stay on track and potentially reduce the number of late assignments that you need to grade. So in Original Course View, you can send reminders about individual assignments to students who haven't yet submitted those assignments. That's a great way to remind students about due dates without contacting the entire class, including those who've already submitted and don't need the reminder. And usually when I've done that, sent the reminder to the entire class, I always get students who've submitted who are then emailing me after that asking me if they can see their submission. So it's a good idea to just contact the students who are missing submissions. This reminder tool is not available in UltraView courses, but students do receive due date alerts in their activity stream for all of their courses, Ultra and Original Course View, and they can set up their preferences so that they receive those alerts via email as well, and you might want to encourage them to do so. We discussed establishing a routine, but as it relates to grading, we can also discuss some specific strategies for pacing. Not every week will be equivalent when you're grading. So for example, when you have a major project due, that's going to be a large chunk of time grading. So one strategy is to alternate between the harder and the easier grading. For example, something that will auto-grade, like a multiple choice quiz, might be alternated with a major project that'll take a lot of time to grade. If at all possible, try to leave some gaps between assessments that will take longer to grade so that you can establish a more manageable pace and so that your grading work doesn't pile up on you. Another grading strategy is to use Blackboard's interactive rubrics, and this will save you a lot of time. Blackboard's interactive rubrics are easy to grade with, but they do take a little bit of time to set up. You might want to see if a colleague has a grading rubric for a similar assignment, or if you can find a grading rubric someone else has created online to cut down on the time that it will take to set your rubrics up. You could always make adjustments to pre-existing rubrics so that they fit your assignments and objectives more closely. Once you've set up your rubric, you can employ it for your assignment. Then when you go to grade the assignment, you'll click on the rubric from the grading view of a student's assignment and click on the boxes that correspond to their performance level for each rubric criteria. Interactive rubrics can be used for Blackboard assignments as well as for individual essay questions and tests. While you may choose to use an interactive rubric, you may find the need to also provide individualized comments. One way to save time on these comments is to save common feedback phrases, for example, in a Word document, so that they're ready to use as you're grading. You can set these up as you grade your students for submissions of a type of assignment, or you can set them up ahead of time based on issues you've noticed in previous semesters. So here's just an example of a list of common feedback phrases that I might set up and I might keep adding to. You want to provide specific examples and ways to improve that are measurable. And even if students have submitted excellent work, you can still provide comments that ask them to think about how they could potentially do things differently or how they could expand on what they've done so far to make it even better. Also, asking questions is a great way to get students to think critically about their work without providing them with the answers or telling them what to do, getting them to figure out what to do for themselves. Another way to save time is to enable grading for discussions if you want to factor it into students' course grade, either as an assignment, as participation, or as part of their attendance grade. Enabling grading will allow you to provide feedback on your students' discussion participation, and you can also use a grading rubric to grade discussions. So for example, I use a discussion rubric with 2 criteria, an initial post criteria and peer responses. I include the levels of performance, for example, proficient, satisfactory, developing, and novice. And then I write a descriptor for what a student post would look like for each level of performance. While I'm grading, I can click the interactive rubric to provide feedback and quickly grade my student submissions, and I can add individualized comments when necessary to clarify their grades. You can also provide comments on students' assignments by using embedded annotation tools. Currently, Blackboard uses Box, which allows you to add comments using the comments tool and to write directly on the assignment using a stylus or your mouse using the pen feature. However, you provide comments to students to ensure that you're efficient with your grading time, be economical with your comments. I try to limit my comments to a handful that address the most pressing issues in my students' work, and then once they've addressed those issues for the next assignment, I can move on to the next set of issues that I see. Providing too many comments may overwhelm students. The goal is for students to reach our course objectives by the end of the course, not necessarily within a single assessment. So choose which outcomes you want to focus on for each assessment and provide focused comments that address how students need to improve in those areas. So here's just a summary of what we went over today of how to manage your time while teaching remotely. Help students get started and be flexible. Again, you didn't have time before the semester began to prepare for remote course delivery, so be prepared to switch things up if necessary. Also manage your expectations both for yourself and for your students, and consider making things a little easier for everyone during this difficult time. Set clear expectations for communication. Students should know how quickly you'll respond to their questions, and you should let students know that you aren't always on. In your Blackboard course, consider putting folders in reverse order with the newest on top so that students can see the newest material first. And if you do get a chance to set things up ahead of time, you can schedule folders to open on specific dates automatically so you don't have to do it manually. Use due dates and check the calendar. You may want to have a master calendar that lists due dates for all of the classes you're teaching so that you can see where overlap might occur and how you'll manage your grading time. Establish a consistent routine. Try to have due dates on the same days each week so that you can plan for a consistent grading schedule and your students can plan for a consistent school work routine. Create Q&A discussion forums where your students can post questions and receive responses from you and, optionally, their peers. This may help lighten your email inbox and prevent multiple students from emailing the same question. And also, if students have a question, they can check the discussion forum to see if it's already been asked and answered. Also, you can use the activity stream alerts to identify students who may be falling through the cracks or off the radar. Touch base with students who go missing in your courses and see what you can do to help them succeed. Also, you want to pace yourself. This is where the routine will come in handy. Also, check your assignment calendar. Are there multiple assignments scheduled back to back that will take a long time to grade? If so, can you find a way to spread them out a little bit and make your grading more efficient? Develop effective and descriptive rubrics. Good rubrics take some time to create at first, but once you've created your rubrics, grading assignments will be much quicker. In addition, you can reuse these rubrics for future semesters when you're in face-to-face instruction. You can collect assignments for face-to-face classes on Blackboard and grade using an interactive rubric, or you could create a grade center item for an offline assignment and still use the interactive rubric to grade on Blackboard. Save common feedback so that you don't have to retype the same comments over and over again. When you use this common feedback, add to or tweak it to personalize it for the student. Also, enable grading on discussions and use interactive rubrics to grade discussion participation and performance. Use embedded annotation in Blackboard to comment directly on a student's assignment. This will save you from having to download, print, comment, scan, and upload your students' assignments if you prefer to write directly on them, rather than or in addition to providing block comments. Be economical with your comments. Don't try to comment on every little thing that you see wrong with a student's assignment. This will take a lot for you, which is not most economical, and it will overwhelm students with too much feedback. Choose the most pressing issues students need to address ahead of the next similar assessment and move on. Finally, one tip I haven't mentioned yet is to try the Blackboard Instructor app. The app is available for both iOS and Android devices, and it lets you view course content, grade assignments, participate in class discussions, and launch Collaborate sessions, though they will open in a browser on your smartphone. Be aware, however, that you cannot add content from the app, and grading is only available for original view courses at the moment, unfortunately. So here is just a list of resources I thought you might find useful as you work to manage your remote teaching workload. Obviously, it would be time-consuming to read through or review all of them, so just choose the ones that you think will be most useful for the issues that you're having with managing your workload, and then go from there. I'll be sending a list of these resources to you in my follow-up email after today's workshop, so you'll be able to look through them, click on the links to access whichever resources you think will be useful for you. Thank you so much for joining us today to discuss managing the remote teaching workload.